Today, I want to talk about the high cost of environmental regulations and climate alarmism, as we're seeing in states like California. Remember this tweet back from last April of 2021? From the office of the governor of California says, "We are not waiting for a clean energy future to arrive. We're taking big steps to get there. California will end fracking and is the first state to set a date to phase out oil extraction. We are committed to a healthier future for California families." Doesn't that sound wonderful, folks? That was April of 2021. Governor Gavin Newsom and a lot of Democrats in the state of California, they are loud and proud of the state's hostility toward the fossil fuel industry. So now fast forward to just last week, June 30th of 2022, the Associated Press reports, looking to avoid power blackouts, California may turn to fossil fuels, an energy source it's otherwise desperate to get rid of. Oops. The debate highlights the challenge some states are facing as they scramble to address the heat waves fueled by climate change. And the article that is linked in that tweet, written by Kathleen Ronayne, "To avoid blackouts, California may tap fossil fuel plants," says a sweeping energy proposal Gavin Newsom signed Thursday puts the state in the business of buying power to ensure there's enough to go around during heat waves that strain the grid. And I'm over here thinking, why? I thought we were in this emergency. I thought we needed the government to restrict fossil fuel consumption to, save California from climate change. Woo! And now what? You want to buy more fossil fuel so that people in California won't have to deal with power outages during a heat wave? Why don't you tell people in California to make some sacrifices? Oh, what? You want to turn the air conditioner on when it's 106 outside in the middle of summer? Don't turn it below 80 degrees because, hey, we got to make sacrifices, folks. We got to make sacrifices so that your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandkid does not have to deal with a few inches of sea level rise. Jesus, stop being so selfish, you guys. But then it goes on to say, but some critics say the method of getting there is at odds with the state's broader climate goals because it paves the way for the state to tap aging gas-fired power plants and add backup generators fueled by diesel. Oops. But it's not just fossil fuels. There's another article written back in April by Sammy Roth for the LA Times talking about how California promised to close its last nuclear power plant. Now, Gavin Newsom is reconsidering. Yeah, because Gavin Newsom, when he was lieutenant governor of California before he became governor, he led a crusade on closing the California's final nuclear power plant, the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. As we can see, the article says, with the threat of power shortages looming and the climate crisis worsening, Gavin Newsom may attempt to delay the long-planned closure of California's largest electricity source, the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant.
Oh, SpaghettiOs!
Article then goes on to say, and a spokesperson for the governor clarified that Newsom still wants to see the facility shut down long term.
Oh, you absolutely suck!
Yeah, maybe get around to shutting it down once Gavin Newsom is out of office and doesn't have to think about political consequences. Although I'm sure he could still shut it down and, drive up energy costs for everyone, and everyone in this fucking state will still vote for the guy. And some of you guys at home who are not from California, not in California, you might be thinking, yeah, Kirk, we get it. You live in California. You hate Gavin Newsom. What's the big deal? Why should I be concerned? Why should I care about what goofy-ass Governor Gavin Newsom is doing in California? Well, you might want to pay attention, because I guess there are rumblings that Gavin Newsom is interested in a presidential run, maybe sooner than later. And I know some of you guys might be thinking, but look, I'm just telling you guys what I'm seeing, and I just want to remind everyone what a total clown show this Gavin Newsom guy is. Now, don't get me wrong. Gavin Newsom is a very terrible guy. Very terrible governor. But one issue that I don't think Gavin Newsom is really that terrible on is the issue of desalination. And I learned this reading a recent article in the LA Times written by Steve Lopez in May of this year, 2022. 5 things Governor Newsom got wrong in supporting the Huntington Beach desalination plant. Governor Gavin Newsom has weighed in again. He supports the massive Huntington Beach desalination plant that comes up for a vote Thursday before the Coastal Commission. I've weighed in too. It's a really, really bad idea, as I explained in December. He links to the article, which is right here. He also wrote this back in December. Desalination plant company not shy about asking the government for handouts. More on that later. Let's start with what Newsom had to say about the controversial project, which has been on the drawing board for years. We need more tools in the damn toolkit, Newsom told the Bay Area News Group editorial board in April, doubling down on his earlier support, saying, "We are as dumb as we want to be. What more evidence do you need that you need to have more tools in the toolkit than what we've experienced? 7 out of the last 10 years have been severe drought." The governor is not entirely wrong. We do need more tools to fight drought, a catastrophic threat to the state that could soon force drastic cutbacks in water use. And we are as dumb as we want to be, so let me now lay out 5 reasons this is a dumb idea. I think you might say why this is a dumb idea. For the benefit of the governor and coastal commissioners, who will decide what is expected by insiders to be a toss-up despite the recommendation against the project by the Coastal Commission staff. And a reason why I bring up this article, even though I'm not hammering Newsom particularly on this issue, is that I think this article kind of brings to light the fact that a lot of climate alarmists and warmongers and environmental justice advocates, they don't exactly have your well-being in mind. They don't exactly have your high standard of living in mind when thinking about these sorts of issues. And you can see it right here. The first reason, the part of Orange County does not need the water. Does anybody really need more clean water? You know, oftentimes when I make a big fuss about people who want to impose wealth caps, wealth taxes, and the Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren types, when they talk about, new wealth taxes, wealth caps, and you see a lot of their cheerleaders asking questions, does anybody really need $1 billion? Does anybody really need a new super yacht? You even see this with the gun debate. Does anybody really need an AR-15? Does anybody You see how this, what I call the darn mentality, the does anybody really need mentality, how this slope gets slippery pretty quick. They start with $1 billion. They start with the super yachts. They start with the AR-15s. And before you know it, they're asking, does anybody really need more more clean water. I actually saw a tweet a few weeks ago from an account with nearly 24,000 followers, an account called Climate Dad, tweeted, "I've got 200,000 years worth of evidence to prove that people don't need fossil fuels to survive," as if to say, does anybody really need to live in an industrialized civilization?
Blow it out your ass.
Here you go. Now they're applying it to clean water. Does anybody really need more clean water? Poseidon, the private company that is begging for massive public handouts to build the plant, is determined to pump 100 million gallons of water from the ocean each and every day. I think that's pretty cool, if you ask me. Which might make sense if it had a customer. No water agency has signed up to buy the water. Okay, I would say that if we had a free market, which we don't in California, but if we did, we'd probably have a lot more desalination plants. But yeah, it would be up to the plants to figure out, okay, we're going to take this unusable seawater in the ocean and we're going to turn it into clean water. You got to figure out how you're going to make some money off of that. Goes on to say, but desalination is expensive. Why is it expensive? Which makes the water more costly than conventionally treated water, and that gets passed on to consumers. If the idea is to transport desalinated water, Huntington Beach water, to parts of the state that it needed, that would make the water roughly the price of champagne. Are we sure about that? And by the way, why is it so expensive? Earlier, I think I skipped over a paragraph. Talk about how many of the states are in dire condition when it comes to water supplies, but not this particular area. It's been reported that parts of Orange County has groundwater reserves that are expected to last decades, along with plenty of recycled water thanks to substantial conservation efforts. Well, is it too much to ask for both? That's what I'm wondering. But yeah, let the private company figure out how they're going to make money off of it. But then there's the second reason. There's an environmental price to pay. State scientists and environmental groups have warned of harmful effects on plankton, fish larvae, and the broader marine ecosystem thanks to massive amounts of intake and discharge. And you don't run a plant this size on, get this, folks, solar and wind power. In my last column on the project, Andrea Leon Grossman of the Marine Conservation and Environmental Justice nonprofit Azul noted that climate change and drought are directly related to greenhouse gas emissions, so it's counterproductive to erect a massive plant that would burn more fossil fuels. And this is a problem with a lot of the warmongers. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy when they impose these restrictions. Remember when I did my rebuttal to Second Thought on the issue of climate change? I brought in the one of the IPCC reports on climate change. So one thing that a lot of warmongers and climate alarmists will do is they'll take data that they find in the IPCC reports, and they'll take that data and they'll take these like open-ended predictions that say, like, we predict with medium confidence that in the future impoverished areas might be more vulnerable to stuff like drought and hunger and food shortages and whatnot. People will take the data in these reports and then they'll conclude, oh, well, then we definitely need the governments of the world to impose fossil fuel restrictions now in order to prevent that from happening. But what they don't consider, as reported in these same IPCC reports, is that an estimated 23% of total greenhouse gas emissions derive from agriculture, forestry, and other land use. There is a cause and effect relationship between fossil fuel consumption and cheap and plentiful food. And so people like me might think about this and say, well, wait a minute. So in order to prevent food shortages and hunger in the future, You want us to impose restrictions on fossil fuel energy today, which according to data from these same reports, if we were to impose these same restrictions, you would make people who are in impoverished areas today more vulnerable to food shortages and hunger, because you're going to make food more expensive or more scarce by imposing restrictions on fossil fuels, which are used to produce and transport more food.
That's just not smart.
And we're seeing it now with how politicians in California, maybe not politicians, but environmental justice advocates and warmongers, how they think about issues like building desalination plants. So California has led the way on shutting down fossil fuel production. They're trying to shut down nuclear energy, making energy more scarce and more expensive in the state of California. So then when it comes time to, when we're prone to droughts, vulnerable to water shortages, and we have this wonderful solution like building desalination plants, we're told by these same people, oh, well, you can't do that because then you're gonna burn more fossil fuels. It's too expensive. Well, why is it expensive? Well, it's expensive because you've made energy more expensive. This is one of the big reasons why desalination is so expensive. So in order to save people from issues like drought in the future, they say we got to impose restrictions on fossil fuels and maybe even nuclear energy today. But wait. We in California, we have, hundreds of miles of coastline access to the largest ocean on the planet. We could just build some desalination plants to turn some of that seawater into consumable water. When that idea is proposed, an idea that's worked in places like Israel so well that their neighbors are starting to warm up to them so that they can get their hands on that sweet desalination technology so that they can produce some more consumable water in the fucking desert. But when this idea gets proposed in California, we get told, well, we can't do that because energy is too expensive. And we don't want to burn more fossil fuels.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
And then there's the third reason. They talk about they talk about how Poseidon, owned by a Canadian company with hundreds of billions of dollars, has spent $1 million lobbying on the project and applied for public loans and handouts totaling roughly $2 billion. And this point I sympathize with. Yeah, I don't think that private companies should be getting stuff like subsidies and tax favors. Although I do think this is a red herring for someone like this. Not to assume much about this guy's politics, but I'm willing to bet that this person is not longing for a Milton Friedman-like free market paradise in a place like California where subsidies to private companies would be very limited, if non-existent. Because in a free market, yeah, companies like this, they wouldn't be getting stuff like subsidies and tax favors from the government. They would be expected, hey, look, you want to build a new desalination plant and make money off of it? Okay, well, go find some private financing. Go on Shark Tank and ask them for money to build your desalination plant. But you're not getting a dime from the taxpayers. Of course, we don't live in a free market here in California, but a reason why I say this is because the article that this guy linked to, another article that he wrote for the LA Times, he mentions how Andrea Leon Grossman of Azul said drought is caused in part by air pollution and building huge desalination plants powered by fossil fuels does not help. So again, we're back to the self-fulfilling prophecy. Restrict fossil fuels, make fossil fuels more scarce, more expensive. Now you're making potential desalination plants more expensive in the name of saving people from droughts, yet you're making it costly, if not impossible, to produce more consumable clean water. She also called the proposal of a $1.1 billion boondoggle that privatizes water. Oh no! And would benefit a wealthy private company. Oh no, you guys. They want to privatize water. Which water are we talking about? We're talking about largely unused seawater in the largest ocean on the planet, the Pacific Ocean, which I'm guessing if this desalination plant drew water out of this area for 1,000 years, it wouldn't even come close to being the equivalent of taking a drop out of an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Taking largely unusable seawater, and they want to turn it into gold by turning it into consumable water by selling it at a profit. The fact that he brings this up makes me suspicious that, again, he's not looking for like a Milton Friedman-like free market paradise and opposing the government handouts on a principled approach like that. But then goes on to say, this is where it gets really rich. While the housing crisis continues to burden low-income communities of color. Well, why is that? Why do we have a housing crisis here in California? Well, as I've talked about many a times, one time I did a deep dive on why housing in California is insanely expensive. It's because of environmental regulations like the California Environmental Quality Act. So yeah, this is environmental regulation at work, and it's a total clown show, folks. This is what leading the way on environmentalism and climate alarmism looks like. Forcing everyone to pay more for plastic bags at the grocery store because it's just 10 cents here and there. What's the big deal? Forcing everyone to pay more for gasoline at the pump. Force everyone to pay more for electricity while hoping your house does not lose power in the middle of a heat wave, making you again more vulnerable to climate hazards. Having to either pay more money for consumable water or tolerate water rationing because does anybody really need more water? Creating an insanely expensive housing market because of environmental regulations that have for decades prevented developers from creating supply to meet demand. And now I'm going to get told that how much of a nice guy Gavin Newsom is because he's sending everyone in California a $1,000 relief check, which is a classic example of the government breaking your legs before applauding itself for handing you crutches to walk around on.